There is a seed rack in the hardware store in town that I walk past every few weeks, and it holds about 40 kinds of seed. I have counted: tomatoes, beans, squash, lettuce, 3 sorts of cucumber, a lot of flowers. Every packet on it is a plant you buy again next spring. And there is a jar in my cellar with seed in it that my grandfather put up. And most of what is in that jar has not been on a rack like that in 70 years. I am going to count down 12 of them for you. All 12 are real, all 12 are still alive, and you can get every single one of them this year if you want to. And I want to say the important thing before I start, because it is the thing people get wrong about this. Not one of these plants stopped working. They stopped being sold. Those are 2 different events, and only one of them has anything to do with the plant. 2 things to stay for, and I will tell you now so you know they are coming. Number 6 is a law that most people have exactly backwards, including some who make videos about it. And when you hear what it actually says, I think you will be annoyed at how long you believe the other version. And number 2 is a root you plant once in your life, not once a year. Once. It has been in kitchen gardens since before there was a United States, and almost nobody in this country has heard its name. My name is Gideon Riehl. I am 65 years old, Old Order, Lancaster County, and I have grown all 12 of these in the same ground, most of them because my father grew them, and it never occurred to anybody here to stop. That is the only reason I have them. It is not cleverness, and it is not preservation work. Nobody in this house ever got the message that these were finished. Now let me deal with the part where somebody usually tells you a company did this to you on purpose, because I am not going to tell you that. The real reasons are duller, and they are written down. Sorghum went because the season is short, the work is brutal by hand, and refined white sugar from cane and beet got cheap. The pawpaw went because it bruises in your hand and browns overnight and cannot be shipped. And the perennial vegetables went because the seed trade runs on annuals. A plant you buy every April is a business, and a plant you buy once is not. That is not a conspiracy. That is arithmetic, and arithmetic does not need a villain. Number 12, Good King Henry. A perennial green that has been in European kitchen gardens since the 16th century and has probably been growing in Britain without a break since medieval times. In spring, you cut the young shoots and cook them like asparagus. The old country name for it was poor man's asparagus. Later in the year, you take the leaves and cook them exactly like spinach. It grows in the shady corner where you cannot get anything else to stand, and it comes back on the same crown every year without being replanted. The reason you have never seen it is the reason I gave you a minute ago. A packet of it is the last packet of it you will buy. The rack has to earn its space every spring, and a crown that keeps producing for 20 years does not earn anything after the first sale. Nobody had to conspire about that. It just quietly stopped being worth the rack space, and then it stopped being in the catalog, and then it stopped being in anybody's memory. Number 11. Salsify, which people used to call the oyster plant, because when you dig the long white root in autumn and fry it in butter, it tastes faintly of oyster. It was in American kitchen gardens right through into the middle of the last century, and it's stored in a cellar bin all winter like a parsnip. Now the shop will sell you a small tin of oysters from a coast you do not live near, and the root that gave a landlocked family the same supper is off the rack entirely. I am going to give you the one warning of this whole video now rather than at the end, because it applies to number 11 and to number 2 both, and I would rather say it twice than not enough. Salsify and the root I have saved for the end are both in the carrot family, and the carrot family contains plants that will kill you. So the rule here has no exceptions. Buy the seed from a seed house, grow it in your own bed, and never go looking for anything resembling it in a ditch or a wood. I am not being dramatic. I am being exact. Number 10. The cowpea, which your grandmother in the South would have called a field pea or a crowder or a whippoorwill. It fed the American South through summers hot enough to stop everything else from setting fruit. And it did the second thing that matters more. It is a legume, and a legume takes nitrogen out of the air and fixes it into the soil through its own roots. Your great-grandfather rotated a pea row through the corn ground and never bought a bag of anything. That is worth sitting with for a second, because it is the same idea as the cover crops I talked about in another video, and it is the whole difference between a garden that gets tired and one that does not. The bag of fertilizer at the store does a job the plant will do for nothing in the same square foot, while also feeding you. 2 crops off one row, one of them invisible. Number 9, sweet sorghum, and this one has numbers because it was not a niche. In the 1880s, this country boiled down as much as 24 million gallons of sorghum syrup in a year. In Kentucky alone, there were up to 21,000 acres of it. It was the sweetener on the table for half the South and the whole Appalachian range. Cane you crushed in a mill and boiled down into a dark syrup that went on biscuits and porridge and into coffee. Now, hear where it went. By the early 1970s, Kentucky was under 500 acres. The agricultural census of 1975 found 2,400 acres in the entire United States, producing less than 400,000 gallons. From 24 million to under 400,000. And it came back a little since, around 30,000 acres now, about 1 million gallons. But the mill that used to be the autumn social event of a county is a thing almost nobody has stood next to. An acre gives you 120 to 130 gallons of syrup in an average year, and up to 300 in a good one. A packet of seed grows a bed of it, and you can crush a small batch by hand. It went not because it was bad, but because it was slow and it was work, and a bag of white sugar was neither. Number 8, the muscadine. A grape native to the American South that was growing here before any European vine ever crossed the water, and every farm ran an arbor of them along a wall. Grapes to eat, grapes for jelly, and a vine that lives for generations. Then the wine industry standardized on European grape varieties. The muscadine got shuffled off into the ornamental and wild category, and it left the nursery lists. It never left the South. It just stopped being sold as food. Number 7, open pollinated corn, the old field corns, Reed's Yellow Dent, Bloody Butcher, and 100 local ones with local names. The point of them is 1 line long. An open pollinated corn comes true from its own kernel. You save the best ears off the field in the fall, and you have next year's seed. A hybrid does not do that. Plant the kernel off a hybrid ear, and you get a poor scattered thing that is nothing like the plant it came from. That is not a scandal, by the way, and I want to be fair about it. Hybrid corn is genuinely more productive, and that is why it took over, and a man farming 1,000 acres has good reasons for it. But it means the seed has to be bought every single year, forever. And for a family growing a garden row for cornmeal and chicken feed, that trade is a bad one. Reed's is still sold. The Federal Seed Bank still keeps it. Number 6, and here is the one I told you to stay for, because I have heard this told wrong so many times that I want to read it out plainly. In 1970, Congress passed the Plant Variety Protection Act, and what you will hear about it over and over is that this is the law that took your seed away from you. That after this, a farmer who saved his own seed could be sued for it. I believed a version of that myself for years. That is not what the law says. The Plant Variety Protection Act has contained, from the day it passed, an explicit exemption for the farmer. You may save seed from a protected variety, and you may plant that saved seed to grow your own crop on your own ground. That was in the original act. It is still in it now. What changed in 1994 and what the Supreme Court settled in 1995 in a case called Asgrow against Winterboer was the other half of it, selling. Before that, a farmer could sell the seed he had saved onto his neighbors. The court held he may sell for planting only as much as he would have kept back to sow his own acreage, and the amendments closed the rest. So the thing that got restricted was the trade in saved seed, not the saving. Sit with that for a moment, because it is the most useful thing in this video. The law that everybody cites to explain why you cannot do this actually says, in writing, that you can. Nobody took the right off you. You were told a story, and you believed it. and you stop saving seed because of a rule that does not exist. That is worth more than any plant on this list. Number 5. Turkey red wheat. In 1874, something like 12,000 Mennonites left what is now Ukraine and settled in Kansas, and they brought a hard winter wheat with them. The first field of it went into Marion County in 73 and came off in the summer of 74. A man named Bernard Workington settled at Halstead that same year and built a mill and pushed it hard among the other settlers. What that wheat did is the reason Kansas is Kansas. It went in the autumn, sat through the cold, and caught the spring moisture, which the spring wheats could not do. Nearly every hard red winter wheat grown in that state now traces back to it genetically. And the variety itself very nearly disappeared as a thing you could actually plant until small millers and the state wheat people brought it back in the 2000s. A quarter acre gives a family bread flour for the winter and next year's seed off the same crop. Number 4. The pawpaw. This is the largest fruit that grows on a tree native to North America, and it grows wild from the Atlantic coast across to Kansas and up to Michigan. Custard textured, tropical tasting, and it has been here the whole time. Your great-grandfather ate them out of the woods by the bagful in September and thought nothing of it. And the reason it is not in your grocery store is the plainest reason on this entire list. The fruit bruises where your fingers hold it. It browns and softens within a day of picking. There is no version of a supply chain that gets it from a tree in Ohio to a shelf in Phoenix in eatable condition, and everyone who tried gave up on it early in the last century. So it did not fail as a food. It failed as a freight item, and a generation grew up 2 miles from the tree and never learned the name. Kentucky State University runs the research program on it, and there are named varieties now with better fruit than the wild ones. But the honest way to get pawpaw is still the old way. Know where a tree is, or plant 2 of your own, and wait. The one thing to know before you eat one is that you eat the flesh and leave the skin and the seeds. Number 3. The heritage dry beans. Cherokee Trail of Tears, rattlesnake, turkey craw, Mostaller wild goose. Beans that came down through families rather than through companies, which is exactly why they are still here and still yours to save. 50 feet of row puts 30 pounds of dry beans in a jar, and the last handful out of that jar is next April's seed. I have talked about the bean row before, and I will not repeat myself, except to say that this is the crop that proves the whole idea. You buy it once. And now number 2, and I have made you wait long enough. Skirret. Say it the way it looks. Skirret. Seum cicerum, and it is a perennial root vegetable that was in kitchen gardens across Pennsylvania and down through the Carolinas, and in Europe long before that. It grows a cluster of white roots about the length of your hand off a single crown. And in the autumn, you dig that crown, split it into 4 or 5 or 6 pieces with your hands, and put the pieces straight back in the ground. Next year, each one of them is a plant. Read that again in your head, because it is the whole reason this one is at number 2. You buy the seed once, not once a season, not once every few years when the packet runs out. Once in your life. After that, the bed pays for itself out of its own roots forever, and you can hand pieces of it over the fence to anybody who asks. John Whirlidge wrote about it in 1677 in a book called Systema Horticulturae, and he called it the sweetest, whitest, and most pleasant of roots. That is a real quotation, and it is 350 years old, and the man was not selling anything. And it is older than that quotation by a very long way. The plant came out of Asia originally. The Romans grew it and thought highly of it, and it was carried into Britain and grown there through the medieval period and on into the kitchen gardens the settlers brought over here. So the thing I am asking you to consider putting in a bed behind your house has been feeding households continuously for something on the order of 2,000 years, and it fell off the shelf in about 1 generation. Now let me tell you honestly what it tastes like, because there is a version going around the internet that says it tastes exactly like an apple with a spoonful of honey in it, and that is somebody's advertising rather than somebody's dinner. Here is the truth. It is sweet, properly sweet, not sweet for a root vegetable. And nutty with it, somewhere between a carrot and a parsnip, and it goes sweeter when you cook it than it is raw. That is a very good root. It is not an apple, and if I tell you it is an apple, you will plant a bed and be disappointed in October, and then you will not believe the next true thing I say. So why is it gone? For the reason I gave you at the start, and this is the clearest case of it on the whole list. Skirret was in the catalogs into the early 1900s, and then it quietly was not. A crown that splits into 6 every autumn is a plant a seed house sells to a family exactly one time. There was nothing wrong with it. There was just no second sale in it, and it never actually went anywhere. The Federal Seed Collection keeps it. Several seed houses sell it today. It is a search away, not a quest. It grows in ordinary garden soil without fertilizer and without spraying, in a bed at the side where you were not doing anything anyway. Remember what I said about the carrot family, and remember it here most of all. Buy the seed. Grow it in a bed. Do not go looking for anything like it in a ditch. That family has members that will kill a grown man, and this is the only thing in this video I will say twice. Before I get to number 1, let me answer the practical question, because there is no use in a list you cannot act on. None of these 12 are on the rack in town, and all 12 are available. The people who kept them going are the small seed houses and the exchanges. Seed Savers Exchange up in Iowa, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, Baker Creek, and a handful of specialists who deal in perennial vegetables. Behind all of them sits the Federal Seed Collection, which holds the ones nobody was selling at all through the years when nobody was asking. That is the part of this that gives me the most comfort, honestly. While a whole country was forgetting, somebody in a government building was keeping the seed cold. Number 1 is not a plant. Number 1 is all 11 of the others standing in one garden at the same time, and a jar on a shelf in the cellar with next year in it. The Good King Henry in the shady corner, the salsify in the bin, the pea row feeding the corn ground, the sorghum out back, and the muscadine on the wall, the bean row saving itself, the corn coming true off its own ear, and the skirret bed you paid for once when you were 40 and are still eating from when you are 70. That is not a hobby, and it is not nostalgia. It is a household that is not renting its food from anybody. And I want to be careful about how I say the rest of it, because this is where these lists usually turn into a sermon. Your great-grandfather was not better than you. He was not wiser, and he was not tougher. He simply had no other option, and the things he grew were the things that worked when there was no other option. That is all this list is. It is the residue of necessity, and it kept perfectly well while nobody was looking. Now the honest costs, because there are 3, and I would rather you heard them from me. The first is that some of these are genuinely more work. Sorghum is real labor, and I would not pretend otherwise. Salsify takes a long season for a modest root. Pawpaw wants years before it fruits, and it wants 2 trees, not 1, or you will get flowers and nothing else. The second is that a few of them are hard to buy, and you will be ordering from small seed houses rather than picking a packet off a rack in town. That is the price of a plant that never made the rack. Expect to plan a season ahead rather than deciding on a Saturday. And the third is the one nobody says. You will not like all of them. Salsify is not for everybody. Sorghum syrup has a strong dark taste that some people never take to. Grow one and find out before you grow a row, and do not let me or anybody else talk you into a bed of something you have never tasted. So here is what I want you to do this week, and it is one thing. Pick one, not 12, one. If you want the biggest return for the least work, order skirret seed now and put a small bed in this coming spring, and you will be splitting crowns off it in a few autumns and never buying it again. If you want something you can eat sooner, Good King Henry in the shady corner where nothing grows. And if you never plant a single thing off this list, take number 6 with you anyway. You may save your own seed on your own ground, and you always could. Now tell me something in the comments and be specific, because I read them all. Did your family grow any of these? Which one and where were they? Salsify in a Pennsylvania cellar, muscadines on a wall in Georgia, sorghum in a Tennessee holler, or a bean somebody carried in a coat pocket and nobody now remembers the name of. If you have got a plant in your family with no name on it, say so. Somebody in that thread will know what it is, and I would rather that knowledge landed there than nowhere. Next time, I want to take you around the beds in this garden that never get replanted at all, the ones that were put in once, some of them before I was born, and have been feeding this house every year since without a seed packet ever coming near them. There are more of them than you would think, and 2 of them are producing right now off grounds my father set. 12 plants, and not one of them failed. They just stopped being sold, and everybody agreed to forget. And forgetting is the only part of this that was ever permanent. Take care of yourselves.